The BLM documentary that you did, The Biggest Lie Ever Sold, phenomenal. When you did that and you kind of going through how from one lens, I'm kind of watching you right now because I'm watching you as a talent, as an individual, to see what evolution you're personally going through, right? Like, hey, as you change and your life changes and you're making money and you have kids and you get married and you move, you also I used to be interested. I'm really not interested. That's not my passion. That's not my fight. This is not my fight. I'm interested. And then now you're going into true crime, with this recent one that you did, which is what's his name? Stephen Avery. Yeah. And what happened with that? So, out of all the topics you could have chosen to do a documentary on, why this?
It's actually a perfect build on destroying the BLM narrative, and it's a perfect build on who I am and how I got into this place. We started this conversation by talking about, Trump coming down and me not wanting him to be there, and then me realizing that I was a victim of propaganda my entire life. And so as a cultural warrior, if that's what you want to call me, I am really focused on getting people to understand that their entire life could potentially being decided upon by propaganda, by a propagandist effort, that what they think they know, they don't know. And so obviously the huge tackle in the political climate of Black Lives Matter was really how I asserted myself in politics, as it was like unheard of, a Black person not supporting BLM. How could you not? And then I needed to show people, after the dust had settled, this is what I was saying. And now Black Lives BLM as an organization is bankrupt, and people watched my documentary. They saw where the money went. They realized that they had been duped because they were emotional and they were made to feel guilty because they were white, and they just sent money into a dark hole. And this next documentary is really the same exact examination. For whatever reason, we set our presets to trusting a documentary more than the news. Like, we're like, well, now I'm getting the real information because it's a documentary. And there's no way that these two lesbians from New York who created Making a Murderer could possibly be playing with me. They must be telling the truth. The villain is actually the hero in this docuseries. Super important first endeavor, really, that Netflix made into docuseries, and it largely built their empire, I would say, on this story. And Netflix has since continued this tradition of taking villains and convincing the public that they're heroes. The Central Park Five, guilty as sin. And yet a Netflix documentary has made people believe that they're not guilty as sin. They've softened Jeffrey Dahmer. This is Netflix's legacy, right? This is what are we doing as a culture? It's not just happening in the real world. We're also seeing aspects of that in the fantastical world. Maleficent, forget that story. What about actually, she's a person in there. Joker, he's actually a human being, right? We take these villains and we turn them into hero, and we're facing this cultural assimilation where people want to believe that actually the villain has a heart. And so I wanted to dive into the Stephen Avery story because I was stunned when I learned the truth about what happened. But there's a larger thing that I'm trying to express to people about mainstream media, about Netflix, right? The power of Netflix, as it is an absolute powerhouse, and it is forming the way that people think. And this story is kind of where it began. And I thought it was an interesting challenge for me because it wasn't split along political lines. I wanted to do something that felt a little more apolitical, because it wasn't like conservatives thought he was guilty and liberals thought that he was innocent. No. Conservatives and liberals alike got duped by this documentary, and Netflix banked. And it's a very compelling story. But the truer story is the study of humanity, the study of propaganda, the psychology of propaganda, which I am forever fascinated about.
Yeah, when I was watching it, you couldn't stop. You're just curious to know what happened with it. Did you follow this story?
I was watching it because going off your point, Candace. So Netflix, when they first aired the first episode, 19 point something million watching it. People would not go on dates. They wouldn't go with their friends. They would speed home and go do it. So Candace, you're painting a different picture to where. And I saw the one of the females that started it. She went to school. She wanted to be a director and a writer and everything. And then she was just like, she read the story on a train, right? She read it in a newspaper, and she was like, I'm going to go in there. I'm going to go to Wisconsin, wherever it was in Wisconsin, right? Yeah. And just flip the script and make it something that people would want to watch. So it's all BS.
Yeah, and to see people like conservatives that I've had on the show that were like, I thought that he wasn't guilty. It's
Me
really,
too.
because they were good. They did a good job at making
good.
You think that these people actually are victims. Mm-hmm. And also, can we talk about why it really matters when you do this in the real world and you're not doing it on a Disney movie, is because a woman who was victimized by Stephen Avery, he was eventually convicted. She was raped by two men. She was shot. She was stabbed. She was cut up into pieces, and she was burned in a burn pit. And she was 22 years old and had her entire life ahead of her. And because of people like Alec Baldwin and Trevor Noah and a mainstream media effort and this anti-policing sentiment and this belief that we have that the villains could actually be the ones that are struggling, her family then not only had to bury her, this faithful Catholic family who handled this in just the most wonderful capacity given the circumstances, then had to deal with conspiracy theories because Alec Baldwin said, well, her brother wasn't crying enough. So, so that's part of it. That means that like actually Stephen Avery is innocent. So you just imagine what we do to real people when we recast the victims as the villains and the villains as the victims. There's real life consequences to that.
I think this is a media thing that goes on, and I was particularly incensed. I remember, if anybody remembers, when Rolling Stone magazine, 2 weeks after the capture of the Boston Marathon bomber, remember there were two brothers?
Yeah.
And one actually ran over his brother during the police chase and killed him.
Yep.
And then he was on the cover of Rolling Stone. They were fawning over him as this attractive guy who just didn't understand. There it is.
So ridiculous.
There it is. And they portrayed him as this because they actually, Rolling Stone won't tell you, is they actually liked the fact that he took action against what was core America.
Yeah.
They actually liked the fact that he had actually stepped out to do it. There was an undercurrent here where they were not only making a hero, he was the resistance against the U.S. establishment that they wanted to see.
And that's in Convicting a Murderer, it's the same thing. In 2015, the anti-police sentiment was building. So the reason why Trevor Noah and Alec Baldwin and all these Hollywood characters were jumping on this wasn't for the same reason people at home were watching it. It was because this was the message that was coming down the pipeline. Yeah. Now all of a sudden we want anti-police. The police are the bad guys. The police are crooked. This is the new American shtick, so to speak.
I have a question. You brought up conspiracy theorists. This doesn't necessarily have to do with a documentary, but it kind of does because it's on Daily Wire. So in your most recent episode of Candace Owens, you kind of threw some shade on the conspiracy theorists. You kind of even all the right wing, and you were like, well, on one hand, I'm a anti-Semitic Kanye supporter, but on the other hand, I'm a puppet of Israel and Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
So which one is it? Can you be a puppet and anti-Semitic?
And that's
How does
the
it
problem.
work?
People get so far into their conspiracy theories. The stuff that I have read about myself, it's insane. Like literally, if you don't place your hands right, even when I'm wearing a T-shirt on my show, if I wear a T-shirt on my show, they'll be like, what does it mean? I'm like, I don't know. It's a plane. They're like, okay, but like, what does it mean? Why is there an orange and a Concorde plane? And I'm like, I don't know. They're like, well, because people on the internet will just make something up. It's true. Literally, I have to be conscious of what I wear. I have to be conscious of my hand placements. They'll say that I'm in the Illuminati. There are conspiracy theories about my father-in-law who sits in the House of Lords in the UK, that he plucked me, works for the Rothschilds, that my marriage is a sham. I mean, people, I get it. I get why we don't trust the media, and that's good. But there's also a level that people will go to create conspiracy theories. And when you watch Convicting a Murderer and we show you the fandom, the fact that this sick, disgusting man with a history of incest and pedophilia and being violent towards women is getting fiancés writing him letters, and he has fiancés in prison and people that are in love with him and crying outside. Yeah, we got to talk about that. Well,
I mean, he does look like Brad Pitt. I mean, obviously, he does. And I'm being sarcastic.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.